Why do Thai people have nicknames? A sleep story of unexpected names, warm smiles, and a discovery deep inside Thai culture. Chapter 1: The day I met a man named Bird. Before I came to Thailand, I thought names were simple things. You were born. Your parents chose a name. People called you by that name for the rest of your life. That was how it worked where I grew up in England. So when I arrived in Thailand and met a man named Bird, a woman named Apple, a taxi driver named Moo, and a hotel receptionist named Ice, all within my first 3 days, I became completely confused. At first, I thought they were joking. Surely nobody was actually named Bird. Surely Apple was a nickname among friends. And surely no official adult introduced himself as Moo. But they did, again and again. And the stranger thing was that everyone else seemed perfectly comfortable with it. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned it. Nobody seemed surprised. One warm evening in Bangkok, I finally asked. The answer led me into one of the most fascinating discoveries I would make during my travels through Thailand. And like many discoveries in Thailand, it began quietly, with rain and tea, and a conversation that changed the way I understood identity itself. The rain had started shortly after sunset. Not a violent storm, not the dramatic thunderstorms tourists often imagine, just a gentle tropical rain that softened the city. The streets outside glistened beneath yellow streetlights. Motorcycles moved through reflections. Food vendors adjusted plastic covers over their carts. The smell of grilled pork drifted through the damp evening air. I sat beneath the awning of a small cafe near the banks of the Chao Phraya River. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. The owner brought me hot jasmine tea. She smiled. Rain makes Bangkok slow down a little. I nodded. That's nice. She laughed softly. Only a little. Her name, according to the menu and business registration framed on the wall, was Supatra, but everyone who entered called her Ning. Ning, one coffee. Ning, can I sit here? Ning, how is your mother? After hearing it 20 times, curiosity finally overcame politeness. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why does everyone call you Ning? She smiled immediately. The kind of smile that suggested she had answered this question many times before. Because that's my nickname. But your name is Supatra. Yes, and Ning isn't part of that name. No, I blinked. Then where did it come from? She laughed. That's a long story. I looked outside. The rain continued tapping softly against the pavement. I lifted my tea. I have time. Ning sat down across from me. Almost everyone in Thailand has a nickname. Almost everyone? Almost everyone. I thought back through the previous week. Bird, Ice, Moo, Apple, Bank, Golf, Gift, Beer, Film, Mint. They all suddenly made sense. Or rather, they all suddenly became even more mysterious. Why? Ning folded her hands around her cup. Because our real names are often very long. I nearly laughed. How long? She pointed toward the framed document hanging behind the counter. I stood and walked over. Supatra Fromarat, 9 syllables. And that was not even particularly long by Thai standards. I turned around. That's quite a name. She grinned. Exactly. As the rain continued outside, Ning began telling me a story stretching back centuries, long before modern Thailand, long before smartphones, long before tourists arrived carrying cameras and guidebooks. Back when villages sat among rice fields and rivers connected communities more than roads. In those days, she explained, many Thai families believed that names carried power, not simply identification, power. A child's name was not chosen casually. A name could carry hopes, blessings, protection, good fortune. Parents often selected meaningful names inspired by virtues, nature, religion, or aspirations for the future. Some names meant wisdom. Others meant beauty. Others meant success. Others reflected spiritual ideas connected to Buddhism. These names could become beautifully complex. And because they were complex, everyday life required something simpler. That was where nicknames entered the story. But there was another reason too. One even older, and far more surprising. Ning leaned closer. My grandmother used to tell me something. What? Long ago, people believed evil spirits might become interested in beautiful children. The rain seemed to grow quieter. The cafe became cozy, almost dreamlike. So parents would sometimes give children very ordinary nicknames. I smiled. What kind of nicknames? She laughed. Oh, things like pig. I nearly choked on my tea. Pig? Yes. People actually called their children pig? Sometimes. Why? Because if a spirit heard the name, maybe it wouldn't pay attention. The logic was strangely charming. Protect the child by making them sound unremarkable, not through fear, but through cleverness. A small cultural shield wrapped inside a simple nickname. The more Ning spoke, the more fascinated I became. Back home, nicknames usually emerged later in life. A shortened version of a name, a joke among friends, a sports team nickname, something earned. In Thailand, many nicknames arrived before a child could even walk. They were gifts, chosen by parents, given with affection, carried from infancy into adulthood, sometimes for an entire lifetime. And suddenly, the mystery of bird, apple, and moo no longer seemed strange. Instead, it felt wonderfully human, a reminder that cultures solve everyday problems in beautifully different ways. Outside, the rain softened further. The city lights reflected on the wet streets like liquid gold. A motorcycle passed slowly. Someone laughed beneath an umbrella, and as I sat there listening to Ning explain the world of Thai nicknames, I began realizing something. This story was not really about names. It was about family, memory, love, and the small ways people carry their childhood with them forever. The tea had grown warm rather than hot. The evening felt slower, gentler, and somewhere deep inside Bangkok, a foreign traveler was beginning to understand Thailand a little better than before. But this was only the beginning, because the next day I would discover that Thai nicknames were far stranger and far more beautiful than I had ever imagined. Chapter 2. Why Thai nicknames can mean pig, bird, ice, bank, golf, and even pancake. The next morning, Bangkok woke beneath a sky the color of soft pearl. The rain from the previous evening had disappeared. Tiny drops still clung to leaves. Street vendors arranged baskets of fruit beneath striped umbrellas. The scent of grilled chicken drifted through the warm air. Motorcycles hummed softly through narrow lanes. And somewhere nearby, a temple bell echoed gently through the morning. I sat beside the window of a small coffee shop, still thinking about my conversation with Ning. The idea that nearly every Thai person carried two names fascinated me. One formal, one personal, one for official documents, one for everyday life. Back home, that would feel unusual. In Thailand, it felt completely natural. Yet, one question remained. If nicknames were chosen by parents when a child was born, why were they so unusual? Why bird? Why moo? Why ice? Why bank? Why golf? Why pancake? I intended to find out, and as often happened in Thailand, the answer arrived when I wasn't looking for it. Around mid-morning, I decided to visit a local market. Not the kind listed in guidebooks. Not a tourist attraction. Just an ordinary neighborhood market where people bought vegetables, fish, herbs, and breakfast. The market was alive with gentle activity. Women arranged bunches of basil and coriander. Elderly men sipped coffee from plastic cups. Children followed parents between stalls. Vendors called greetings to one another. What struck me most was how often nicknames floated through the air. Bird, mint, film, bank, moo. Every few minutes, another unusual name appeared. By lunchtime, curiosity won again. I approached a fruit seller who had been smiling at everyone all morning. According to the sign above her stall, her official name was Siriporn. Yet every customer called her Apple. Can I ask something? She smiled. Of course. Why does everyone call you Apple? Her eyes lit up immediately. The same reaction Ning has shown. Another question foreigners apparently asked often. My mother liked apples. I waited. That's it? She laughed. That's it. The simplicity surprised me. Back home, Names often involved family history, generations, traditions, formal rules. But Apple's nickname existed simply because her mother liked apples. No deeper reason, no complicated explanation, just affection, a memory, a preference, a small piece of family history preserved in everyday conversation. Then Apple pointed toward a neighboring stall. You should ask him. The neighboring vendor was selling grilled bananas. His nickname was Golf. Why golf? I asked. My father loved golf. Again, that's simple. Not because he played golf, not because he resembled a golf ball, not because of any story involving sports. His father simply liked the game. I began laughing, not at them, but from delight. The logic felt wonderfully free. There seemed to be no limits, no strict rules. Parents could choose almost anything: animals, foods, objects, nature, colors, English words, sports, anything that felt warm, memorable, or pleasant. And somehow it worked. Over the next several days, I started collecting stories. Each nickname opened a tiny window into a family. One evening, I met a university student named Mint. Why Mint? My mother liked the smell. Simple, beautiful, personal. The next day, I met a photographer named Film because my father loved cameras. Then came Ice. When I was born, my parents thought the word sounded modern. Bank. My parents hoped I would be good with money. Everyone laughed when he told me that, including Bank himself. Did it work? I asked. No, we both laughed. The more people I met, the more fascinating the tradition became. Nicknames weren't random, even when they seemed random. Behind every nickname stood a story, a moment, a feeling, a memory frozen in time. Some reflected hopes, some reflected humor, some reflected trends from a particular era. Some reflected things parents simply found cute. One afternoon, I met an elderly man whose nickname was Lek. It means small. Why small? I asked. He smiled, because I was a very small baby. How old are you now? 82. For 82 years, people had called him small, and somehow it felt perfectly normal. That evening, I returned to Ning's cafe. The river flowed slowly beside the city. Longtail boats moved through golden reflections. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and rain-soaked earth. Ning placed tea in front of me. You've been researching nicknames. How do you know? She laughed. Because every foreigner does. I nodded. They are amazing. She smiled. They tell stories. Exactly. Her expression softened. Sometimes they tell stories even families forget. I looked up. What do you mean? Ning pointed toward herself. My nickname was chosen by my grandmother. Why Ning? She looked toward the river. For a moment, she seemed far away. As a baby, I never cried. I smiled. My grandmother said I was quiet and peaceful. The word Ning can suggest calmness and stillness. Her grandmother had seen something in a newborn child, a tiny personality, a gentle presence, and that observation had stayed with her for decades. Every time someone called her Ning, they unknowingly repeated a memory from the first days of her life. I sat quietly, listening. The river reflected the evening sky. A boat drifted past. Somewhere nearby, someone played soft music. And suddenly, the tradition felt deeper than before. Back home, many childhood memories slowly disappear. Baby clothes are packed away. Photographs fade. Stories become incomplete. But in Thailand, part of childhood remains visible every day. A nickname can carry a family memory across an entire lifetime. Not officially, not formally, but lovingly, quietly, naturally. The following weekend, Ning invited me to visit her hometown, a small community several hours outside Bangkok. Rice fields stretched toward distant hills. Wooden houses stood beneath coconut trees. The pace of life felt slower, gentler. The evening air carried the sound of insects singing beneath the sunset. Families gathered outside their homes. Children rode bicycles along narrow roads. And everywhere I went, nicknames continued appearing. Even more than in Bangkok. An elderly woman introduced herself as Dang, which means red. A farmer answered to Dam, which means black. Another man was called Noi, small. A woman nearby was called Yai, big, I nearly laughed. People are actually called big and small? Ning nodded. Very common. The simplicity felt refreshing. There was no need for complexity, no need for elegance, no need to impress anyone. The names felt honest, human, warm. As darkness settled across the village, we sat outside her aunt's house. A soft breeze moved through banana trees. Stars slowly emerged overhead. Someone brought fresh mango. Someone else made tea. The conversation drifted naturally toward family memories, and eventually toward nicknames. That was when Ning's aunt shared a story I would never forget. When my father was born, she said softly, his nickname was chosen to confuse bad spirits. I remembered what Ning had mentioned earlier, the old belief. The protective nickname. Her aunt nodded. People worried more in those days. Life was harder. Illness was common. Many things felt uncertain. Parents wanted every possible blessing for their children. So sometimes a child received a deliberately ordinary nickname, or a funny one, or a nickname nobody would envy. Not because the child was unimportant, but because the child was precious. The logic felt surprisingly beautiful. Protection through humility. Love hidden inside simplicity. The insects sang steadily in the darkness. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The village settled into evening, and I realized something important. Foreigners often notice the funny side of Thai nicknames, the unusual words, the amusing translations, the surprising introductions. But beneath the humor lies something much deeper. A nickname is rarely just a nickname. It is a tiny gift from one generation to the next. A small piece of family history carried every day. A reminder that before someone became a doctor, teacher, engineer, farmer, artist, or business owner, they were someone's baby, someone's hope, someone's dream. Much later that night, as I lay beneath a mosquito net listening to the sounds of rural Thailand, I thought about all the people I had met. Bird, apple, golf, bank, ice, mint, film, leg, dying, ning. Each nickname carried a story. Some stories were simple, some were funny, some were touching, but all of them connected people to family, to memory, to love. And that realization made Thailand feel a little less mysterious and a lot more beautiful. Outside, the wind moved gently through the rice fields. The stars shimmered above the countryside. The village slept peacefully. And somewhere in the darkness, another discovery about Thai nicknames was waiting, because I was about to learn something even more surprising. In Thailand, a nickname isn't always chosen once. Sometimes, it changes the course of a person's life. Chapter 3. How a Thai nickname can shape identity, personality, and relationships throughout life. The village woke before sunrise. At first, I thought I was dreaming. A rooster crowed somewhere beyond the rice fields. A dog answered from another direction. Then came the soft rumble of motorcycles starting in the distance. The air was cool, much cooler than Bangkok. For a few moments, I lay quietly beneath the mosquito net, listening. The world outside seemed to stretch awake, one gentle sound at a time. No alarms, no rush, no traffic horns. Only life unfolding naturally beneath the pale light of dawn. I stepped outside just as the first sunlight touched the tops of the coconut trees. Mist floated above the rice fields like thin silk. Water buffalo stood motionless in the distance. The sky slowly shifted from silver to gold. And as I watched the village begin another day, I found myself thinking about something Ning's aunt had said the night before. A nickname was not just a name. It was a gift, a memory, a connection. But there was something more, something I could not quite explain. The way people use nicknames here felt different from anything I had experienced before. It felt personal, almost intimate, as if every nickname carried emotional meaning far beyond its actual word. That morning, I would begin to understand why. Ning's mother prepared breakfast on the wooden porch. The smell of rice porridge drifted through the cool air. Fresh herbs sat in small bowls. Steam rose gently from cups of tea. The entire scene felt calm enough to belong inside a painting. As we ate, neighbors began passing by. Each person greeted one another warmly. What fascinated me was how naturally nicknames flowed through every conversation. Nobody used formal names. Not once. Everyone used nicknames. Children, teenagers, adults, grandparents, even village leaders. It was as though nicknames formed the true social language of the community. The official names existed, but everyday life belonged to the nicknames. A few hours later, I met a local school teacher. Her formal name was astonishingly long. I tried to pronounce it. Failed. Tried again. Failed even worse. The entire room laughed kindly. "Don't worry," she said. "Everyone calls me Fawn." Fawn? It means rain. I smiled. "Because you were born during rain?" Her eyes widened. "How did you know?" I laughed. I'm beginning to understand Thailand. As the morning continued, I discovered that many nicknames carried tiny clues about a person's story. Not always, but often. Rain, Sunday, bird, small, big, mint, apple. Each one reflected something. Sometimes an event, sometimes a hope, sometimes a personality, sometimes simply a moment that mattered to a parent. The nickname became a bridge between the past and the present. And unlike many childhood stories that fade with time, this bridge remained visible every day. That afternoon, I accompanied Ning to a local temple. The temple sat beneath enormous trees that had likely witnessed generations of village life. Golden roofs shimmered beneath the sunlight. Wind moved softly through hanging bells. The atmosphere felt peaceful, almost timeless. Monks moved quietly across the grounds. Visitors removed their shoes respectfully. Children chased one another near the entrance before being gently reminded to slow down. And once again, nicknames appeared everywhere. Near the temple entrance, an elderly monk greeted villagers as they arrived. Everyone called him Luang Pilek. The word lek again. Small. I couldn't help asking, has everyone called him that his entire life? Ning nodded. Since childhood. I looked at the elderly monk. His hair had long since turned gray. His face carried decades of experience. Yet, part of his identity still connected directly to the tiny child he once was. There was something strangely beautiful about that. In many cultures, adulthood requires people to leave childhood behind. In Thailand, childhood seemed allowed to stay. Not completely, but gently, quietly, as a companion throughout life. That evening, I finally asked Ning something that had been bothering me. Do people ever outgrow their nicknames? She thought carefully. Sometimes. Really? Sometimes a person gets a new nickname. Now, I was fascinated. A second nickname? She laughed. Sometimes even a third. The explanation surprised me. Occasionally, a person's personality changed dramatically, or a friend group invented a new nickname, or a workplace created one. The new nickname might stay, or it might disappear. Unlike official names, nicknames were alive, flexible. They could evolve with life itself. I thought about how unusual that felt. Back home, identity often feels fixed. Names stay the same. Labels stay the same. Expectations stay the same. But Thai nicknames seemed more fluid, more human, more forgiving. They allowed space for change. That night, the village held a small community gathering. Nothing formal. Just neighbors sharing food beneath strings of warm lights. Children ran through the grass. Elders exchanged stories. The air smelled of grilled chicken and charcoal. And as the evening unfolded, I noticed something I had somehow missed before. Nicknames did more than identify people. They created closeness. A formal name carries respect, distance, structure. A nickname carries warmth, familiarity, affection. When someone used a nickname, it often signaled a relationship, a connection, a shared history. And that realization explained something I had felt throughout my travels in Thailand. People often seemed warm surprisingly quickly, not superficial warmth. Genuine warmth, the kind that makes strangers feel welcome. Nicknames played a role in that. They softened interactions, made conversations feel more personal, more human. Later, I sat beside an elderly farmer named Dam. The evening breeze moved gently through the fields. Fireflies appeared among the trees. The atmosphere felt almost magical. I asked him if he liked his nickname. He laughed. Of course. Why? He thought for a moment, then smiled. Because when I hear it, I hear my family. The answer lingered in the air, simple, yet powerful. When I hear my family, not my identity, not my status, not my achievements, my family, a nickname connected him not to success or reputation, but to love, to home, to belonging. I suddenly understood why so many people kept their childhood nicknames for life. The nickname was not merely a label. It was emotional memory. A tiny piece of family carried everywhere. The moon rose slowly above the village. The gathering continued. Laughter drifted across the fields. Someone played quiet music. Children grew sleepy. Parents gathered belongings. The night became softer, slower. And as I watched families interact beneath the stars, another realization emerged. Foreigners often ask, why do Thai people have nicknames? But perhaps that question misses something important. The better question might be, what happens when a society allows affection to become part of everyday identity? Because that seemed to be what I was witnessing. Not simply a naming tradition, but a cultural expression of closeness. The following morning, before returning to Bangkok, I walked alone through the village one last time. Sunlight illuminated the rice fields. Birds moved through the trees. A grandmother swept leaves from her yard. A child rode a bicycle down a narrow road. Everyone greeted one another. Everyone knew one another. And almost everyone called one another by nicknames. The system wasn't complicated. It wasn't formal. Yet somehow it strengthened the invisible threads connecting people together. Family, community, memory, belonging. As our bus pulled away from the village later that day, I watched the countryside slowly disappear beyond the window. The rice fields became smaller. The roads became busier. Buildings grew taller. Eventually, Bangkok returned. But my understanding of Thailand had changed. I no longer saw nicknames as amusing curiosities. I saw them as cultural treasures, tiny stories hidden inside everyday conversations. Little reminders that identity is not only about who we become, it is also about who loved us first. Yet one mystery still remained. Over the previous days, I had heard dozens of nicknames: bird, apple, moo, golf, mint, film, ice, bank, rain, small, big. But recently I had started hearing something else. Nicknames that sounded remarkably modern. Names inspired by celebrities, technology, luxury brands, international culture, and they seemed to belong mostly to younger generations. Something was changing. Thailand's nickname tradition was evolving, growing, adapting to a new world. And in Bangkok, I was about to discover how. Chapter 4. How modern Thailand created new nicknames inspired by movies, brands, technology, and global culture. When I returned to Bangkok, the city felt different. Not because Bangkok had changed, but because a week earlier, I had seen only the surface. The traffic, the markets, the temples, the skyscrapers, the food. Now I was beginning to notice the invisible things, the cultural details hidden beneath everyday life. And nowhere was that more obvious than in the world of Thai nicknames. The village had shown me the older side of the tradition, names connected to family memories, nature, birth stories, childhood traits, ancient beliefs. But Bangkok was about to reveal another chapter entirely, a chapter that felt surprisingly modern and surprisingly creative. A few days after returning from the countryside, I met a young Thai graphic designer named Beam. We were sitting inside a cafe filled with students working on laptops. The air conditioning hummed softly. Coffee machines hissed behind the counter. Rain clouds drifted outside the windows. The atmosphere felt very different from the quiet village. Yet, somehow, the conversation returned to the same subject. Nicknames. Always nicknames. Beam? I asked. Like a light beam? She smiled. Exactly. Why? My parents thought it sounded modern. I laughed. That answer seemed increasingly common. Not symbolic. not traditional, not connected to ancient beliefs, simply modern. And that was when Beam told me something fascinating. Every generation of Thai parents tends to choose nicknames that reflect their own era. Suddenly, everything made sense. A nickname could become a tiny time capsule, a clue about the period in which someone was born, a reflection of trends, culture, and society at a particular moment. Parents in one generation might choose nature-inspired names. Another generation might prefer English words. Another might be influenced by television, movies, music, sports, technology, even international brands. The nickname became a snapshot of a moment in history. That afternoon, Beam introduced me to several friends. Their nicknames sounded almost like a list of modern life itself. First came Bonus, then came Cartoon, then came Focus, then Fame, then came Smart. I struggled not to laugh, not because the names were strange, but because they were so wonderfully imaginative, and nobody seemed to find them unusual. They fit naturally into conversation, as normal as John, Sarah, David, or Emma would back home. How do parents choose these names? I asked. Beam shrugged. Whatever they like. That answer made me smile. Because after several weeks in Thailand, I had discovered that many cultural practices here balance tradition and flexibility in beautiful ways. There are customs, patterns, values, but often there is also room for creativity, for personality, for warmth. Nicknames seem to embody that balance perfectly. A few days later, I found myself riding the BTS SkyTrain across Bangkok during rush hour. The city flowed beneath the tracks. Roads stretched between towers. Markets hid beneath overpasses. Motorcycles streamed through traffic. Inside the train, dozens of people stared quietly at their phones. And suddenly, I noticed something. Several young passengers had their nicknames displayed on social media profiles. Boss, Bossy, Cream, Proud, First, Nice, Mild, Earth, Stamp, Bright. The names felt modern, international, effortlessly adaptable to a global world, and yet they remained distinctly Thai. Back home, official names usually dominate public life. In Thailand, nicknames often appear everywhere. Social media, school, university, workplaces, friend groups, sports teams, even business cards. The nickname moves fluidly through society, not replacing the official name, but living alongside it, and that flexibility allows the tradition to evolve continuously. One evening, while walking through a shopping mall, I encountered perhaps the most surprising nickname yet. A young sales assistant introduced herself as iPhone. I blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say iPhone?" She nodded confidently. "Yes." I laughed. She laughed too. Apparently, she received that reaction often. My father loved technology. Of course he did. At this point, I was no longer surprised, only delighted. The next day brought another, a university student named Lexus, then a young man named Benz, then someone named Pepsi, and later, someone named Cookie. Every nickname carried its own tiny story, sometimes meaningful, sometimes playful, sometimes impossible to predict, and that unpredictability made the tradition feel alive. One evening, I returned once again to Ning's cafe beside the river. The rainy season had settled comfortably over Bangkok. Soft rain tapped against the awning. Boats moved slowly through reflections of city lights. The atmosphere felt peaceful, familiar, almost like returning home. Ning placed tea on the table before I could order. "You've found more nicknames." I laughed. "How do you always know?" "Because your face says so." I told her about iPhone. She nearly spilled her tea laughing. "That one is unusual." "Even for Thailand?" "Even for Thailand." We both laughed. Then she grew thoughtful. "You know the tradition survives because it changes." I looked up. "What do you mean?" Ning pointed toward a group of teenagers sitting near the river. If nicknames had remained exactly the same for hundreds of years, young people might stop using them. That made sense. Traditions survive when they adapt, not when they freeze. The nickname tradition had survived generations precisely because it allowed creativity. Each era could make it its own. Each family could contribute something new. The foundation remained the same. Parents giving children affectionate names. Everything else could evolve. The rain grew slightly heavier. Streetlights reflected across the river. Somewhere nearby, music drifted through the night air. And as I listened to the rain, I began noticing something deeper. The nickname tradition reflected Thailand itself, a country that often balances old and new simultaneously. Ancient temples standing beside skyscrapers, traditional markets beside luxury malls, monks using smartphones, families preserving old customs while embracing global culture. The nickname tradition mirrored that blend. Ancient roots, modern branches. Several days later, I visited a university campus. Students filled open-air courtyards. Coffee shops buzzed with conversation. Groups gathered beneath trees. And everywhere I looked, nicknames flourished. What fascinated me most was how naturally they crossed social boundaries. Professors often knew students' nicknames. Friends used them constantly. Even workplace interns introduced themselves with nicknames first. The nickname served as a social bridge, a way of making interactions feel less formal, more approachable, more human. One student explained it perfectly. "My real name is important." She smiled. "But my nickname is me." The statement stayed with me long after our conversation ended. My nickname is me, not legally, not officially, emotionally, socially. Personally, the nickname represented the version of herself that existed within relationship, within daily life, within community. As my weeks in Thailand continued, I noticed something else. Foreign visitors often focus on famous attractions. The beaches, the islands, the temples, the food, and rightly so. Thailand offers all of those things beautifully. But many of the country's most fascinating cultural discoveries are much smaller, much quieter, almost invisible, like nicknames. A detail easy to overlook, yet capable of revealing an entire worldview. One rainy evening, I sat alone beside the river after Ning closed the cafe. The city lights shimmered on the water. A warm breeze moved through the night. The sounds of Bangkok softened around me, and I thought about everything I had learned. At first, Thai nicknames seemed funny, then interesting, then charming. Now they felt profound, because they reveal something about how people connect, how families express affection, how communities create belonging, how traditions adapt without disappearing. The rain slowed to a gentle mist. Boats continued moving through the darkness. And somewhere across the city, thousands of people were being called by names chosen years ago by loving parents. Bird, apple, mint, golf, bank, film, rain, bright, focus, bonus, cookie, and countless others, each carrying a story, each carrying a memory, each carrying a small piece of Thailand. Yet one final question remained, a question I had not fully answered. Perhaps the most important question of all, why had this tradition endured for so long? Why had generations continued giving nicknames to children when many other customs had faded with time? The answer would arrive unexpectedly, not through history, not through research, but through a simple family moment that revealed the true heart of the tradition. And when it happened, I finally understood why Thai nicknames are far more than names. They are love made visible. Chapter 5. Why Thai nicknames are really about love, family, and belonging. The final discovery. Several weeks had passed since I first arrived in Thailand. The city that once felt unfamiliar now felt comforting. The sounds no longer seemed chaotic. The scents no longer seemed strange. Even the daily rhythm of Bangkok had become familiar. Morning food stalls, afternoon rain, evening markets, late-night conversations beside the river, and somewhere along the way, Thai nicknames had become part of that rhythm. I no longer paused when someone introduced themselves as bird, or mint, or golf, or apple, or bank. Instead, I found myself wondering about the story behind each name, because by now I understood something important. The nickname itself was never the most interesting part. The story behind it was, one afternoon, just before my trip was scheduled to end, Ning invited me to her family's home again. This time there was a celebration. Nothing grand, nothing formal, simply a family gathering. 3 generations together: grandparents, parents, children, aunts, uncles, cousins, the sort of gathering that exists in every culture. The sort of gathering where conversations overlap and laughter moves naturally from room to room. The house sat beneath large mango trees. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves. Fans turned lazily above the wooden porch. The smell of food drifted through the warm air. Everything felt peaceful, comfortable, alive. As family members arrived, I noticed something. Everyone seemed to have multiple identities, official names, nicknames, family nicknames, special names used only by grandparents, sometimes even playful names used only by siblings. A single person might answer to several different names depending on who was speaking, yet nobody appeared confused. The system worked effortlessly because behind every name existed a relationship, and relationships were what mattered. Near sunset, a little girl ran across the yard chasing bubbles. She could not have been more than 4 years old. Her grandmother called her Mali. Her mother called her Fawn. Her older brother called her Nu. The little girl responded happily to all 3. I smiled. How many names does she have? The adults laughed. Many. Eventually, I learned the story. Her official name appeared on government documents. Her nickname had been chosen by her parents shortly after birth. Another affectionate name had emerged naturally within the family. Over time, each name became attached to a different relationship, a different form of love, a different connection, and suddenly I realized something I had never considered before. Perhaps names are not simply labels. Perhaps names are emotional maps. The evening grew softer. The sky turned orange, then gold, then deep blue. Children played beneath the trees. Adults prepared dinner. Grandparents watched quietly from the porch. The atmosphere felt timeless, and as I sat among the family, I began noticing how often nicknames carried affection. Not just identification, affection. A grandmother speaking gently. A parent calling a child to dinner. An old friend greeting another after many years. The nickname often arrived wrapped in warmth. Back home in England, people certainly love one another. Families have traditions. Friends create nicknames. Parents invent pet names. But in Thailand, the nickname seems woven directly into everyday social life. It accompanies people from infancy through adulthood, through school, through work, through marriage, through old age. The nickname grows older alongside the person, yet somehow never loses its connection to childhood. As darkness settled over the village, dinner began. Bowls appeared, plates appeared, conversation flowed easily. And somewhere between laughter and stories, I heard an elderly grandfather call his 60-year-old daughter by the nickname he had given her as a baby. The moment lasted only seconds. Most people at the table barely noticed it, but I did. And something about it touched me deeply, because in that moment, the 60-year-old woman was not merely an adult, not merely a mother, not merely a grandmother. She was also still her father's child. The nickname had preserved that connection, quietly, faithfully, across decades. I suddenly understood why so many people never abandon their childhood nicknames. To abandon the nickname would be like removing a thread from a tapestry. The thread may seem small, but it connects everything. Later that evening, I sat outside beneath the stars. The air felt warm. Crickets sang in the darkness. A distant dog barked somewhere beyond the rice fields. The family gathering continued behind me. And for the first time since arriving in Thailand, I felt I had finally found the answer to my original question. Why do Thai people have nicknames? Not because official names are too long, although many are. Not because of ancient beliefs about spirits, although those beliefs helped shape the tradition. Not because of modern trends, although modern culture continues to influence it. The deeper answer was simpler. Thai people have nicknames because relationships matter. Nicknames make interactions feel closer, warmer, more personal. They help preserve childhood memories, family stories, moments of affection. They allow people to carry pieces of home wherever they go. And perhaps most importantly, they remind people that before they became anything else, they belonged to someone. The realization felt surprisingly emotional. I thought back to all the people I had met during my journey. Bird, apple, golf, mint, film, ice, bank, fun, lek, dam, beam, and many others. Each nickname represented more than a word. It represented a relationship, a family, a story, a moment preserved through language. The moon rose higher above the village. The gathering slowly began winding down. Children grew sleepy. Grandparents prepared to rest. Dishes were washed. Chairs were stacked. The ordinary rituals of evening unfolded peacefully around me. And as I watched, I noticed something beautiful. Nobody seemed to think of nicknames as unusual. Nobody considered them remarkable. To them, this was simply life, simply family, simply Thailand. Yet, perhaps that is exactly what makes the tradition special. The most meaningful parts of culture are often the things people barely notice, the habits that feel natural, the customs that seem obvious to those who live with them, the small details that quietly shape everyday life. For visitors, those details become windows into an entirely different way of seeing the world. And Thai nicknames are one of those windows. The following morning, my journey finally came to an end. I packed my bags, said goodbye to Ning, and prepared to leave Thailand. At the airport, I stood in line beside travelers from many countries. Some were returning home. Some were beginning adventures. Some looked excited. Others looked tired. The familiar sounds of rolling suitcases echoed through the terminal, and suddenly I received a message on my phone. It was from Ning, a simple message, just one sentence. Safe travels, my friend. And beneath it, she had signed not with her official name, but with the name everyone knew. Ning. I smiled, because now I understood. That single word carried years of family memories. The voice of her grandmother, the story of a quiet baby, the affection of childhood, the relationships that shaped her life, all hidden inside 4 simple letters. Ning. As my plane lifted into the sky, Thailand slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. The rivers became silver lines. The fields became patches of green. The cities became distant shapes. And I thought about the misunderstanding that had started this journey. Before coming to Thailand, I believed names were simple, fixed, straightforward, merely practical. But Thailand had taught me otherwise. Names can be memories. Names can be protection. Names can be affection. Names can be history. Names can be home. And perhaps that is why Thai nicknames endure generation after generation, because they do something profoundly human. They remind people that identity is not built alone. It is built through relationships, through family, through community, through love. A nickname is a small gift given at the beginning of life. And in Thailand, many people carry that gift forever. Tonight, somewhere in Thailand, a newborn child is being held by loving parents. Perhaps they are discussing possible nicknames. Perhaps grandparents are offering suggestions. Perhaps everyone is laughing at unusual ideas. And somewhere among those conversations, another story is beginning. Another nickname, another memory, another small thread woven into the rich cultural fabric of Thailand. A tradition both ancient and modern, simple and profound, ordinary and beautiful. And as the tropical night settles softly over villages, rivers, cities, temples, markets, and rice fields across the country, parents call children home, grandparents tell stories, friends greet one another, families gather around dinner tables, and countless nicknames drift gently through the evening air, carrying affection, carrying memory, carrying belonging, one generation to the next, like they always have, and perhaps, like they always will. The end. 3 things many foreigners discover about Thailand through this story. Almost every Thai person has a nickname, often given shortly after birth and used throughout life. Many nicknames preserve family memories, hopes, personality traits, or moments connected to childhood. Thai nicknames help create warmth and closeness, reflecting the importance of relationships, family, and community in Thai culture. Thailand still holds countless stories waiting to be discovered. If you would like to continue this journey together, I hope to see you again in the next story from Thailand Through Eyes. And if there is somewhere in Thailand you wish to visit through story, leave your suggestion below. Perhaps our next journey will begin there. you.